Welcome, everybody. We're so excited to have you with us today. Thanks for joining us. And we'll just give it a minute. I see some folks still coming in, but we're really excited for this conversation. All right, so today we're going to talk about how businesses can use the contracts that they've already won to build pipeline. And I'm Mariel Reed, I'm CEO and founder of Pavilion. And this webinar was really inspired by conversations we've had with suppliers who primarily viewed their contracts as a way to move the deals that were already in pipe to close faster. So after they'd already done the hard work of establishing a relationship and convincing the public entity to work with them. But there's a huge opportunity for suppliers to use their contracts earlier in the process to open doors and generate new pipeline. So we have an all-star panel of public entity and sales and marketing leaders to dive into this topic today. And to kick us off, we're going to do a round of introductions. So can each of you briefly introduce yourselves and your organizations? Albie, I'll kick it over to you to start.
Thank you very much, Mariel. Thank you for inviting me to be on this panel. Thanks, guys, for being part of it. I'm very excited about it. So my name is Albie Udom. I am the Deputy Director of Finance and Chief Procurement Officer for the City of San Jose. And I've been in procurement for about 17, 18 years now, all with public entities. And with that, I'll turn over to Renee.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Pavilion team, for having me on. My name is Renee Almaraz. I'm the Director of Procurement Services for the City of Richmond, Virginia. I've been doing contracting, procurement, sourcing, both on the commercial side, the federal side, and the public agency side for a good 35 years. And, we do everything, we procure everything here in Richmond with the exception of real estate. And we do not do grant contracts. So from fire trucks to police vehicles, to systems, to bridges, to buildings, we do it. And Bernie, go ahead.
All right, my thanks as well. Bernie Erickson, Chief Marketing Officer and Director of Innovation for FSG, Facilities Solutions Group. We are one of the U.S.'s largest lighting distributors and one of the largest electrical contractors in the country. And we also manufacture, sell, and service signs. We have a data division, a smart buildings division. So we're a very vertically integrated company. I'm glad to be here.
Yes, my name is Heather Sheehan. I reside in Beaufort, South Carolina. I work with Ecolab for the last 17 years. Currently, I lead the Ecolab institutional government sales team. We provide cleaning and sanitation chemicals to the government, have responsibility over contracting and government sales. So really excited to be a part of this panel today.
Awesome. Well, thanks all. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm Mariel. I'm CEO and founder here at Pavilion. And I started Pavilion really inspired and frustrated by my time with the city and county of San Francisco. And before joining local government, I was an early employee at a tech startup that has since gone public. Fast forward to today, Pavilion has become the go-to resource for thousands of public entities that come to our product to find and buy from suppliers on cooperative contracts. And by cooperative contracts, I'm referring not just to the contracts from national cooperatives, but also from state and local entities and other public agencies can piggyback on or use. Pavilion is free for public entities, and we have built the largest repository of these shareable or cooperative contracts, so entities can quickly find a supplier for pretty much anything they need. And in fact, 3 out of 4 of our users say that they use Pavilion to make a decision about which supplier to work with. So for suppliers, we get your business in front of public entities when they're deciding on a supplier to buy from and have a preference to purchase through an existing contract, so to take this cooperative purchasing pathway. You can think of us like a matchmaker. We've gotten really good at connecting buyers with suppliers who can meet their needs and their compliance requirements all at once. Before we dig into today's discussion, we'd like to invite you to do a little activity with us and help us get a sense of how you're promoting your cooperative contracts already. So we've listed out a few options to ask how you and your company today are promoting your cooperative contracts. So if you're joining us, please take a minute to go ahead and respond, and you can check a couple different options as well if more than one apply, and help us get a sense of your experience so far. I love watching all these results come in. We get to take a look as it's live before we share the results with you, and it's fun to see the different options kind of grow. Looks like the primary path so far, the one that's winning out by a wide margin, is sales teams mentioning contracts in sales conversations, which is great. We'll give you a couple more seconds here if you haven't filled it out yet. Looks like we have over 70% of folks that have submitted. All right. Well, let's take a look at the responses that we've gotten. And it's great to actually see that most folks in the conversation are already taking steps to make use of your cooperative contracts, the contracts that you've been awarded. And as I shared before, it looks like sales team mentioning those contracts in sales conversations is the most popular tactic, but it also looks like many of you are using some marketing materials and word of mouth, and of course those field marketing events as well. And some of you aren't yet promoting your contracts, so we're glad you're here too, and we have some good insights for you today. All right, so let's see. All right, so thanks for sharing that with us. And going ahead, I want to just give you a preview of the conversation today and where we're going to take it. So we're going to start out by setting some additional context about shifts that we're seeing in cooperative procurement and why they matter for businesses that partner with the public sector. Then we're going to dive into challenges that suppliers face when they're looking to use their contracts to generate pipeline. Albie and Renee are going to share what they've really seen work when suppliers use their contracts to establish relationships. You know, from the public entity perspective, a lot of suppliers oftentimes ask, like, tell me really, like, what does it take? I want to hear from the public sector side. So we'll do that. And then Heather and Bernie are going to speak to some of the initiatives that they're working on here too from the supplier's perspective. And then we'll save time at the end to answer your questions. And you can also drop questions as we go into the chat along the way, or use that Q&A feature at the very bottom. And our team will be monitoring that, and our panelists will be as well. So if you have a particular question for anyone who's on the call, go ahead and drop it in there too. And then a few housekeeping items. Yes, this session will be recorded, and we'll be sharing the recording and the presentation slides with you after the webinar. So let's jump on in. Most of you are likely already familiar with cooperative procurement because you're here in the first place, but as a quick recap, this is when public entities purchase using a contract that another public entity has created through a formal competitive solicitation process. And so it's not waiving the competitive requirement, it really is leveraging an existing process, one that meets the entity that's going to piggyback their standards to go ahead and expedite that purchasing, that procurement pathway. And it's really a win-win for agencies and businesses alike, because public agencies can procure what they need faster and more efficiently, and suppliers get to sell without going through a new and lengthy competitive process. We've seen that the portion of spend through cooperative contracts, again, using that term broadly, has increased from about 10% back in 2012 to 20% or more of spend today. So it's already doubled in the past decade. And considering a cooperative is increasingly becoming a default practice among public sector buyers as well. So more than 96% of public entities report that they're regularly utilizing cooperative procurement. And by the way, these purchases are not for small ticket items. The median purchase on a cooperative contract is 6 figures, about $128,000. So today, procurement teams are strapped for resources, but the departments they serve still need to make purchases. So it's not surprising that public entities are increasingly looking to purchase off of an existing contract first before turning to a new bid or RFP process. And as I mentioned, Pavilion is the largest platform for entities to find cooperative contracts. So we're in a really unique position to share insights. And we surveyed our users about how often they look into purchasing through cooperative contracts before they go down that path of running a new solicitation. And as you can see, school districts and universities here are most inclined to purchase through cooperative procurement, followed by counties and cities. But the overall proportion of entities looking to leverage a cooperative contract first is pretty high across the board. So I want to turn here now to Albie and Renee and invite you to share, how do your entities think about when to purchase through a solicitation or a bid versus leverage an existing contract from a national co-op, from a state, from a neighboring entity? Can you share a little bit more about your thought process there?
That's really great. And I like this graph. This is interesting that school districts are highest. I think we need to reverse that. The cities need to go right up. For us, just like most public entities, we're struggling for resources, but financial, personnel, and everything. So we tend to go more towards cooperative as a default than bidding our own out, especially for if it's not an ERP system, if it's not very expensive, we tend to go more towards the cooperative. And then what happened was a couple of years ago, our governing body actually allowed us to make some changes to our municipal code, which made it easier for us to be able to leverage other people's contracts. So in my shop, when people come to us for anything, the first thing we say to them is, hey, before you even start thinking about bidding this out, let's go find a contract that we can figure out, because we can save you time, we can save you money, and we can save everybody hassle. So for us, it's kind of default at this point.
Thank you. Renee, how about you in the city of Richmond?
Yeah, so see, it's the magic 8 ball. That's kind of what we use. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, I will tell you that the agencies, they're pretty savvy about utilizing cooperative contracts. So they bring us options many times. We're aware of many options, and Pavilion has really aggregated those, which is great for us and for all my departments and agencies. But it really comes down, it's a matter of time. What time do they have to spend in it? And then what are the requirements? And then there's code, because we can't co-op construction. There's a few little segments in construction we can use on a co-op, but construction is not part of, we don't have that ability to utilize a co-op on construction. I'll tell you that, depending on the agency, DIT will tend to use, for systems, they'll tend to use state contracts because they've been vetted through the Commonwealth. So they'll try to kind of grab those and utilize those, which is great. Those are all solid cooperatives as well. So depending on the time constraints, depending on how deep the requirements are, if it's off the shelf, if they can take something and come up with a requirement that isn't totally solid, that they can kind of maneuver a little bit within that requirement, they'll utilize a co-op, and we support them 100%.
Awesome. Yeah, great point. I think oftentimes it can be a little bit confusing around like, hey, why are we so bullish on cooperative contracts in this category, but not in others? And I think it's important to remember sometimes actually there's regulation that prevents a particular purchasing vehicle from being available. And I know we see variation in that across the country, and even by entity type sometimes as well within the same state. So that's been something we've followed along on as well. Okay, thank you for that. And I see a few questions pop up, which we'll aim to answer async as we go along. I want to move ahead and just capture this trend, which Renee started to talk about, and I know Albie, you touched on it too, which is just that more stakeholders beyond the dedicated purchasing team, the procurement team, are also looking towards cooperative contracts to buy faster. So I think this is one trend that we've been watching closely and pretty excited about, but we're seeing more and more interest in cooperative contracts from public servants broadly. So in the departments themselves, in addition to the public procurement teams that Albie and Renee represent. So, campus staff at schools and in higher education around Pavilion, they're looking for contracts. For counties, for cities, it's those departments like public works, facilities, parks and rec, fire departments, et cetera, that are also now savvy about this procurement mechanism, although sometimes to varying degrees, but increasingly savvy about this procurement mechanism and aware of its benefits. So why is that? I think our panelists touched on this already a little bit, and we're going to invite them to share more. But from what we've heard, procurement teams are strapped in terms of resourcing. A lot of teams are looking at vacancies on their teams and have a lot to do. And some of them are now actually training their departments to find compliant contracts on their own. So educating we call them end user departments on this purchasing pathway. So this way a department can actually bring a contract to procurement to complete the final due diligence. And so Albie and Renee, I know you touched on this, we've talked about it a little bit before, but I'd be curious to understand, what does this look like for your agencies, and how are you educating or thinking about empowering your end user departments, about cooperative procurement and making this purchasing pathway accessible? What role do they play in the cooperative purchasing process?
So I'll go first if you don't mind.
Perfect.
Yeah. So rather than having agencies just pull rabbits out of their hats and bring us anything to use, because what we were finding is one agency would use a particular cooperative, another agency would use that cooperative, another agency would use that same cooperative and bring it to us 3 different times. What we've tried to do is strategically capture the majority, not the majority, but a good number of cooperatives that they're continually using, and have us kind of have some ownership within it. So they can come to a single point. We can get it done faster. We can issue that purchase order faster. If there's a wrapper agreement that needs to be done for it, we can work through legal, get that done, eliminate some of the waste and some of the steps in that, try to really lean out the process a little bit. So that's what we've done. I think, I appreciate everything that the agencies bring to us, but sometimes the agencies aren't talking to each other. So we get a lot of duplicate kind of work that we're trying to eliminate.
And I do want to call out that this does represent a shift in perspective of, like, it's a position, I think, Renee, you've taken as leader, as a procurement leader, to really seek to empower your end users with that knowledge and say, hey, yeah, I'll tell you more about this. I'll educate you more about this purchasing path. Be savvy on it. Know that, we're not 100% always guaranteed to go with what you suggest and bring to us, but it's an invitation to really help them move the process along and be partners. I know there can oftentimes be a perspective too of like, no, it's just way too confusing for end user departments. We just want them to come to us. We'll take it all on. So that implies a certain level of kind of trust and openness to collaborating with those end user departments, and understanding that there'll be some sort of collateral damage along the way of, like, we won't always get it right every single time. But it's an important way to start to build trust internally and encourage a more customer-centric collaborative experience.
They'll let us know when we don't get it right also. So.
but kudos to you for pushing that experience. Albie, what's it like at the city of San Jose?
So first of all, what Renee just said is a model that I would love to get to, whereby we can identify some contracts and just say, these ones are good. If you're buying anything of those ones, you're great. Right now, we do that to an extent, because what we do with we tell people, if you find a contract on Pavilion, you find a contract on Omnia, find a contract on this, chances are 90% it's good. But it would be good to actually have something posted. But for educating departments here, we kind of take a 3-pronged approach here. First of all, when we made a shift from doing our own RFPs and everything to cooperative, we developed a set of guidelines, which we posted on our intranet. So, and we have a link to that. Whenever a department says, here's the link, go look at it. If it works for you, come back to us with something. So they're getting pretty savvy about finding contracts. And, so that coupled with training, I'm a big believer in training. So we've had Pavilions come out and done a training for us, citywide training, which was very well received. I think we had about 250 city employees attend that training. We've done our own training for staff here. So we kind of walk them through, this is what our code says about this. Our preference is, yes, we'd rather do this than go out and start doing an RFP, but we just want to make sure that, we're within code. So that kind of training really helps. And then the other thing that I do with my team every month, we make sure that we visit as a team, we visit one of the departments, especially the major ones. And when we go there, we lay it on the line for them. We see what we've bought for them in the past. They tell us what their needs are. We'll tell them what's going on. And, and then we share that, if this is what you want, there's a chance we can get it for you through this cooperative or through this other non-traditional way of getting it. So it really helps them to, they start to see us as a trusted partner as opposed to somebody that's just sitting there taking their orders. That's been really helpful for us.
No, that's great. I know internally, there always is this tension of procurement, like you said, Albie, being a trusted partner and not just saying no or start again, start at square one, go back, do not pass go. So I think this is a really awesome way to encourage that trust. I do want to call out again, because a lot of times when we have conversations with suppliers here, they're coming in with this perspective of, hey, I have this awarded cooperative contract, but I'm mostly using it in the field with my sales teams to close sales faster after, I already have a customer that I've been working with or talking to, and they just need a purchasing pathway to kind of figure out how we can work together. And we know they don't want to go out to RFP. But I think what you've both touched on is actually also starting with the cooperative pathway as a preference, both internally within those within your procurement team, but then increasingly also with your end user departments. And so again, just a huge opportunity for suppliers that are joining us today to really talk about your contracts earlier in the buying process with departments when they're still figuring out who to work with overall. So we're going to come back to that. The last trend that I'll speak to is just the rising popularity of contracts for piggybacking overall. And I think some of you already touched on this as well, but purchasing through contracts from state or local entities and not only national purchasing cooperative contracts. So this is an opportunity that we often see some suppliers overlook, leveraging, your state awarded contracts. I think Renee, you spoke about that with IT procurement and leveraging those state contracts as an example. But here are snapshots of a few different markets on Pavilion. So states like Arizona, California, Florida, where local entities or purchasing alliances have added their contracts to our platform. And in these states, we actually see that engagement with those local contracts is on par with or even higher than contracts from national cooperatives. And our hypothesis behind that is oftentimes the types of suppliers available, the categories of coverage are expanded when we bring these contracts into play as well. So there might be certain things that you think automatically, okay, I'm going to go to a national purchasing cooperative for what's available, let's see. But then for some categories of purchase, there might be other types of contract vehicles that are also available and complementary. So Albie, I want to turn it over to you here because you recently launched the Bay Area Procurement Alliance, BAPA, and that's super exciting. I don't think many folks on the call actually have context for that work. So can you share a little bit about the Alliance and how you're educating folks about the benefits of sharing local contracts and the value of regional collaboration here in the Bay?
So that's great. This is something that's really, really dear to my heart. A very exciting project. So this all started a couple of years ago. I ran into a lead in Orange County where they had the Orange County Procurement Alliance, and the presentation she did at NIGP was really grabbing for me. So started thinking about that, and now we launched successfully the Bay Area Procurement Alliance in October. One of the things that struck me as we started working outreaching towards launching this is that everybody wanted this. Everybody wanted to be able to network and leverage other people's contract and share their contract and whatever. But, because of the way historically the public entities have worked in silos, nobody was doing anything about it. So this became an opportunity for people to come out of their shell and say, yes, I want to do this. So we launched that, and since then, I've been having conversations with folks that came to the meeting, came to the launch, did not come, are still signing up, and kind of talking to them about what the benefits of being able to leverage each other's contract will be for us, will do for us, how we can work smarter, how we can work better, how we can save on resources, and how, for me, part of it is being this trusted partner for the department, how we can grow that. So what's been happening since then? A lot of people have been reaching out to me going, I'm really interested in this. I want this angle to it. I'll give you an instance. The Port of San Francisco came to the launch, and that launch meeting. After that, they reached out to me because, well, I didn't see any other ports there, but we would like to have other ports there because we'll have the same kind of contracts, dredging contracts, whatever. So I reached out to the Port of Oakland. I reached out to the Port of Redwood City. I reached out to the Port of West Sacramento. Say, hey, guys, why don't we all get together and do this? So Port of Oakland is on board now. I'm still talking with Redwood City and West Sacramento. And I'm very excited about this because our next big meeting is coming up in February, and I want to be able to report out what we have done. But even more importantly, we're also trying to push it, not just within here, but also through CAP at the conference that's coming up. I'm going to be hosting a presentation with the lady from Southern California, where we're going to talk about regional cooperative models and, the benefits to that. So stay tuned for that.
Yeah. No, super exciting work, and kudos to you, Albie, for taking the lead on putting that group together. Again, I think just seeing that there are oftentimes, like, I think that port example is great, right? Where it's like, how many dredging contracts are available from national purchasing cooperatives? Maybe not that many, but local agencies also have those needs. They're doing the work, and they're oftentimes working with similar suppliers as well. So the ability to share, basically to peep what's in your neighbor's filing cabinet and actually leverage that can be a win-win for the agency and also the supplier, because it's a lower acquisition cost to sell more off of contracts that you've already been awarded. So really cool model, and one of, I would say, a handful that we're seeing across the country in different flavors. So excited for you to continue sharing that out.
Absolutely.
The California Association of Public Procurement Officials meeting coming up in the new year as well. So, so thanks for sharing that. I want to flip over now and look at some of, we talked about some of the opportunities, but what are some of the challenges that suppliers face when it comes to using cooperative contracts to actually generate pipeline? So I want to turn here, and thank you for being so patient, Bernie and Heather, as we dig into the public sector side, but I want to turn here now to the sales and marketing leaders that we have on the call. So Heather and Bernie, how do you think about selling through your cooperative contracts versus, say, responding to bids or RFPs? And what have been some of the challenges in selling more through the cooperative contracts that you've been awarded, especially when it comes to generating those new opportunities and new pipeline? So maybe Heather, we'll start with you.
Sure. So I'll start. So obviously, it's been said a lot today, but selling through cooperatives is obviously more efficient for both, not just our customers, but also for Ecolab. Although we're a big company, we have a really limited small team. So one of the challenges that we faced with co-ops is sometimes educating our traditional RFP customers about the viability of cooperatives as an option. So that's been a challenge. And then another challenge that we faced is generating a pipeline through a co-op can be challenging because when you have an RFP, it's easy to understand the bid process and the bid timing. Mm-hmm. So we don't always know when a customer intends to use a co-op for purchasing. So those have been two challenges that we faced.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. It's like, what are the signals that that someone is kind of getting ready or starting to go down the path? If it's not posted somewhere, how do you find out about it? That's super helpful. Bernie, how about you? What's your experience been here?
Sure. When we look at cooperative purchasing, versus RFPs, two separate verticals, for us. We respond and are involved in both. The big benefit, obviously, of the cooperative contracts are the savings that can come to our end user or our customer by utilizing it. So once it gets to an RFP stage, and it's funny because we have many cooperative contracts, and many times the cooperatives will say, "Oh, did you see this RFP? Maybe you can use our cooperative contract." And the answer is usually no. At that point, the agency has spent time and money to put their RFP out and, maybe do engineering or whatever it is. So it really, it's a much better experience for us and the agency if they could use the cooperative contract. And our job is to really get out there and make them aware of, the existence of the various contracts that we have and how they can utilize them. There's some natural skepticism that exists out there, or some lacks of information, and as was mentioned earlier, sometimes construction can't go through, or labor work might not be allowed in an area. But we try to be a source of information in those cases, and be able to explain where it can fit best, and where it can add the value. And one of the biggest areas it can add the value, a lot of times somebody may not be 100% sure they want to do something, right? They may not be aware of a payback that's related, or what grants are available, or what energy savings might be available. And they may come to a company like ourselves and say, can you do that analysis for us so we can put out an RFP? And there we don't necessarily have an interest level to do that, because it's going to cost us money and time and put us at a disadvantage to a competitor. So we really need to educate in that area.
Yeah, speaking as someone who's been on the public sector side, but also has worked with a lot of suppliers, I know this can be tough because, and Albie and Renee, I'm sure you have plenty of experience here. It's like, you have the expertise. And so there is this tension of how do you make that option available as a supplier, and make sure that, your public sector or customer is aware of the options available, without being kind of too pushy of like, hey, I know you should be doing this. And this is something that came up a lot with the work around the cost to procure calculator, which we launched, I think a month or so ago now, where we had to caution, definitely, it's like, hey, sales teams will like this. It's a great way to kind of check in and nudge your partners in the public sector, but please do not write, hey, I think you should use the cooperative contract because it'll save you this much money, and be choosing kind of the pathway on behalf of the public sector. So it's a bit of a dance, and you're right. I think sometimes you can't necessarily always you can't be too forceful. You have to make the business aware, but there could be other things and considerations that are going on in the background as well, that the supplier might not be able to see too. So it's a little bit of a tango. Thanks for sharing. Okay, so I think from our conversations that I've shared before with many suppliers that sell to state, local, and education entities, we definitely have heard this pain point around, sales teams don't know when or how to use the contracts, especially if they have many contracts. So like, oh, I know we have contracts, but which ones? Or like, what do you got? And they might stumble a bit there. Marketing teams might not necessarily be highlighting contracts on their websites or in their collateral or in field marketing events. And if suppliers have multiple product lines or services, their existing customers may not know that they can use those contracts to buy other things. So this opportunity to kind of expand business with existing customers, where you might be able to offer something on a contract that's available that your target customer, your current customer, doesn't necessarily know that you're capable of doing. So, as a supplier, if you've invested time and resources in actually getting on these contracts, the question is, how do you use them to deliver pipeline impact? So want to shift over to a bit more of a discussion here across the aisle. And going back to Albie and Renee, would love to hear what you've seen work when suppliers are marketing their cooperative contracts to your entity, especially if they haven't worked with your entity before. Like, what's the best way for sales teams to effectively reach out, to your entities with their contracts? And what are some pitfalls that you've seen that you would, urge suppliers to avoid in their outreach as well?
I can make a start. I'll start with a pitfall. Like most people, I don't like cold calling. Don't call me up and say, what problem can I solve for you? You don't know that I have a problem. I've actually listened to a couple of people and they start going on and they say, well, that works. I don't know that that's a problem for me, so I'm not sure about that. But what really works for me is that kind of warm contact. When I meet a salesperson, when I meet a rep from a company, say for instance, you know, I run into them maybe at a conference or somewhere, and we build up a rapport. Being, how they say, out of sight, out of mind, just kind of staying in touch without being overly pushy work. And I give a lot of people the opportunity to come and present to my team. We have bi-monthly all staff meeting. And I bring people in to come and present at those. So come and talk to us about your product. And they talk to us. So one thing that really works for my staff is when you can break it down for them so they understand it. Then being able to answer their questions, and more importantly, providing them the service. So when they really need that service, you're able to be there for them and walk them through it. This is what you're going to do. And if there's a problem, being there for them to be able to deal with that. That does help a lot. And with that, we've actually built up a good number of people that we go to because we know they're going to be there for us if we ever reach out to them.
Awesome. Yeah. So this challenge, I think that some folks have touched on of how do I know, I think Heather mentioned, like, how do I know that my potential target customer is in market at that exact moment? Well, you don't. So keeping a pulse, continuing to build the relationship, sort of nurturing that relationship so that you get a sense of, hey, this potential customer is kind of going to be coming to market. And, it's either going to go the new solicitation, new bid route, or potentially, the cooperative contracting route. Renee, experience to add here?
Sure. And I'll start with the pitfalls too. I was the director of contracting at San Diego Unified for a number of years, and my door was open to any supplier that want to come in and talk to me. So in San Diego County, we're the largest school district. So we had about 120,000 children. There are about 45 to 50 other school districts in the county with much fewer kids. If you're going to come in and talk to me, know your customer, know your capacity and how you can serve, if you can serve. So many contractors, so many suppliers and vendors that I spoke with couldn't serve that level of district. So I always had a list on my desk of the other districts and points of contact that they could reach out to that were much smaller districts that they could work with. I wanted, they've got to grow. I get it, but they've got to know where they're going. One other pitfall, and I'll just make it the last one, is you have a cooperative contract and it has pricing in it. If you quote something to us, it better match the pricing in the cooperative. All right. I have my team validating quotes that the agency flips over to us. They want to use this cooperative and they don't match. If they're not going to match, that's a problem. That is a problem with pricing. That's a problem with invoicing. That's a problem with contractual, just being, plugged into the right terms that are on the contract itself. So be careful when you quote. It's all about attention to detail. I was telling this team in a warm-up session, when I go to conferences, if there's a table there and there's a supplier there that I think is interesting and that I want to talk to, I always look to see if they're on a cooperative first. My intent is not to go there, oh, how can I do an RFP and how can I do a bid? How can I make it simpler, easier, faster, cheaper, better for my customer? That's what I'm looking for. So I'll leave it there.
Awesome. Yeah, I appreciate both of those pieces. I think one of the things we've definitely heard is actually, I think it was a Florida-based reverse vendor trade show recommendation that came across our desk recently that was like, bring yourself, bring business cards and a one-pager or brochure with your business offerings and any cooperatives that you have available for us as well. So just being aware that those contracts exist, even if you're not kind of in market at that exact time. We do have a couple of questions that I think are relevant here as well. One was around really kind of trying to understand, are there preferences for the types of cooperatives that you leverage? What kind of considerations you have there? I think, how do you kind of think about state versus national co-ops. We get this question a lot from suppliers too, that are really curious, like for my category or for my target customer segment, what national purchasing cooperatives are kind of preferred or most relevant. Should I go state? Like basically, how do I think about a strategy? So I think probably the high level answer here will be, it depends on who you're trying to target, what category you're in, what geography or type of entity you're really focusing on. But Renee, Albie, I don't know if you have a notion there of like how you evaluate different contracts or nudge or guide. It sounded like, Albie, you were sort of like, hey, we actually have a really wide and broad set. So, we're pretty open.
Yeah. So for us, one of the things that we tend to do is when it's a complicated procurement, we want to try and do something internally. For instance, if we're buying 5 trucks that will take about 6, 7, 8 years to build, we want to do our own bid. But we leverage state contracts to buy usually for our fleet, So that's one thing. If it's an ERP system, we don't want to. We want to do our own procurement, but otherwise, as long as the media code allows us to leverage, we can leverage it. Also, we tend to, even though we're in the state of California, some of the contracts from DGS in California are not actually competitively solicited. So, and our mini code says part of the requirement is that the procurement process has to be similar to ours. So we tend to look at that. I would rather go to maybe leverage a contract from City of San Francisco first before I start trying to figure out if State of California will work. So, so the kind of the Muni code, the type of project, all kind of determine, and of course the time that we have available.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, super helpful. Renee, anything else to add there?
I guess you've got to keep in mind that, an agency and personnel in an agency have a relationship with an existing supplier. And it could be good, bad, or indifferent, but it's something that they don't have to worry about because they have a relationship with an existing supplier who's providing services, providing goods, and hopefully they're on time and within budget and et cetera. So it's a matter, you got to crack the nut, right? How do you expose that? So the more available, the easier it is to be able to crack that nut, the better story you can bring, the better value proposition, if you will, that you can bring to us, and know what your customer's using already. Know what my internal client is already using. How can you compete against them, and how can you win against them, and make sure you have the facts and data around it. If you come to me with those facts and data, or my team, we certainly will bring it to the customer to help them understand, this may be an opportunity for you to make a transition. So, you got to know I go back to know your customer, really know your customer, know who they're using, know what they're using them for. How do you have an edge on that?
If I can just add a point to what Renee said, that the other thing that also I get particular about is how easy it is to deal with that particular supplier. There are some suppliers that are just very difficult to negotiate with, especially when you're dealing with services, when you're piggybacking services. So if somebody comes to me with 2 or 3 different cooperatives, 2 different contracts, and I know that one supplier is very difficult to negotiate with, I'm going to be turning my face to the other 2 before I go to that one. So.
Yeah. Great. Thank you. Renee, I want to spend a little bit of time because I know we've worked on some initiatives to help some of your awarded suppliers get a bit more savvy on the contracts that they've been awarded and get more visibility and be able to leverage those contracts as well. So we've talked a lot about education, and I know this is an investment that the City of Richmond and your team is really leading around investing more in helping to train and educate your supplier community. So can you speak to how supporting your awarded suppliers get on more projects with Richmond and other entities you're thinking about supporting those awarded suppliers, in like more recently?
So yeah, so we've established a pool of suppliers in different disciplines, primarily services, to help the city have some things that they can pull off the shelf at any point in time, not do a bid, not do this, not do that, but just pull it off. So we went out and did it in advance of the requirements. So we didn't have requirements. We know what they use. We know what the services are out there. So we built that library of contracts for the departments to use. And I will tell you, at 3:15 Eastern Standard Time, I have a multi-services poster that I've got to review so we can put up around City Hall and other places to let people know about it. We're also talking with strategic communications on how we're going to, announce and, let everybody know that this is available out there. So, I mean, we're doing everything we can internally to let them know that these are available. One of the things you do when you award a number of suppliers out there, some folks are going to get work, some folks are not going to get work, some folks it's just going to take time for it to sit in. These are, I think, up to 5 years. I think we have renewals up to 5 years on these agreements. So it may take some time, but it's a matter of, we've got you have you on your resume now, you've got a city contract, which should help you if, from the standpoint of other work that you need to, you might want to capture. But, we're in the throes of really trying to get the departments up to speed on what we're doing around how they find them. And the fact that we're aggregating these in Pavilion is going to be huge. It's going to be just a helpful one-stop shop if they need to go somewhere. So we're in the throes of that communications process right now.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. That's great and super exciting, and a lot of education to do also with suppliers that maybe that's their first award. That includes piggyback language, so a slightly different focus there too, but really meaningful. So those are some of the public entity perspectives on how suppliers can maximize your awarded contracts. Let's turn to what suppliers are doing here. So Heather, I want to start with you. How are you using your cooperative contracts earlier in the sales process versus at the end to think about closing the deal after the public entity has already decided to buy from you?
So we work really closely with our cooperative partners and our distributors to understand their customers and the members and what they may be interested in. We also work to support the sales associate earlier in the process to understand if a cooperative purchase is a possibility, and we coach around the best course of action. And lastly, I'd say we're using Pavilion to let our customers know what contracts we have and may be good for their specific needs.
Great. Well, Bernie, I want to flip it over to you. How about on the FSG side? What are some of the strategies that you're pursuing, for your team to use cooperative contracts more effectively to get FSG into consideration?
So we have multiple things we do. We're always, trying to build awareness. We do thought leadership type of webinars across different types of verticals, whether it be schools or municipalities, and focus in on products that we have on our co-op agreements. We have a landing page on our website that's dedicated to the cooperative purchasing agreements that we have, and it breaks it down by multiple verticals, even including some of the buying groups. And we have a guide center that is doing outbound calling. We'll be calling different people in school districts, let's say, to help them understand that we're there and we have these agreements, particularly where we may have a new office opening up or a new geography that we're really working with. And then our arrangement with Pavilion has been great because we find that in our company, and we are a distributor, right, and a contractor as opposed to a manufacturer like Heather, so it's our people, but we find that geographically we may have some regions that are just a lot better at using the agreements, and so we can target on geographies and try to increase awareness in areas where we want to focus on.
Awesome. So some of the panelists have mentioned the role of Pavilion in getting cooperative contracts in front of public entities, and I recognize that not everyone on this call might know how Pavilion works. So let me just double click into that a bit. And typically, when we speak to suppliers, and I think Bernie and Heather have mentioned this too, their public sector go-to-market strategy looks something like this. It's like on the awareness side, you're using sales and marketing outbound, you're making those calls, you're showing up at conferences, hopefully you've included your cooperative contracts, but you're building your presence, you're seeking to nurture a relationship. And I think Albie mentioned this too, right? It's like, hey, you're building that relationship and seeking to make a connection. But it can also be extremely valuable for suppliers to get in front of entities when there's purchase intent, meaning that those entities are actively in the market looking to buy what you have available. And businesses tend to have strategies in place to find new RFP or bid opportunities. I'm sure many of these tools look familiar to most of you. But we've heard that they don't have tools or strategies for ensuring that they're being considered when the entity is looking to purchase through a cooperative contract. So that second pathway. And this is, I think, Heather, you touched on it earlier when you sort of said, we don't have signal, when someone's raising their hand saying, hey, we have a need and we have an existing desire to purchase through a cooperative pathway. So that's really where Pavilion comes into play. We're the only channel out there that gets suppliers in consideration when public entities are actively deciding who to buy from and they have a preference to purchase off of an existing shareable or cooperative contract. So to bring this to life, I want to go through a real example of how we played matchmaker in connecting FSG with a city for a lighting project. So here is a look at Pavilion. And you can see here, I'm going to go ahead and search for concrete lighting poles and go ahead and run that search. And when I do, you can see here that there are several suppliers and contracts that pop up, but that top result is FSG. And so I'm going to see the different contracts that are available. These have been vetted for me. So, I'm impersonating a buyer here that has already set some compliance requirements as well. So I know that this contract already meets my compliance needs. And as I mentioned before, we have 100,000 contracts on Pavilion from national co-op, states, and local entities too. So putting all of those contracts in one place and showing public servants the ones that they're able to use that meet their compliance requirements saves them the trouble of having to go to all these different websites, calling or emailing agencies, and they have higher assurance that the contract vehicles that they're seeing are ones that they'll actually be able to use and will meet their compliance criteria. So I've gone ahead and clicked into the contract. I can see a quick overview of the contract and more information about the contract scope, the supplier. So I'm working through my due diligence here on the public agency side. And as I scroll down, I can find key documents like the award letter, bid documents, other contract documents. So again, I'm able to kind of speed through and at a glance see that the contract likely meets requirements for my entity. Say I want to go ahead and talk to the supplier and get a quote. So I can actually send FSG an email straight through Pavilion or give Bernie a call on the phone, old school, I know, but some of us still like phone calls. And at this point, I've gotten information about FSG as a business, what they offer, and their contracts. So there's pretty good likelihood that we can have a strong conversation about my project. And Bernie can speak to this in a bit, but this is how an entity in Florida actually found FSG on Pavilion. And the lead is now one that we're still tracking, and this has become a sizable opportunity out there for FSG. So that's what the experience looks like for public sector buyers and how Pavilion works to really play matchmaker between public entities and suppliers. And we're excited that we've already helped businesses generate over $1.5 billion in sales. And businesses are using us to really expand their reach, win new customers. We've helped businesses win projects across a range of different products and services, and have also helped them get leads when entities were actually originally looking for a competitor. So maybe they start, and I think, Renee, you mentioned this too, it's like maybe they have someone in mind that they're going to work with, but seeing another option is also a great opportunity, especially if it's on a contract vehicle that meets their requirements and needs as well. We've also helped businesses generate more revenue from their existing customers. So for example, we helped an IT consulting firm win a project with a city that they already had an existing relationship with, but the department that was running the search actually had no idea that the company could implement the type of software that they were looking to roll out. So an example where you might already have an existing relationship, but maybe not with the exact right point of contact who's aware of everything that the business can offer. So that's an example of a large implementation project, but we've also helped, high volume, low margin businesses generate sales as well. So it's free to be listed for suppliers and to receive business through Pavilion. And I just want to share a couple steps for those that haven't logged in yet that you can take today to get started. So you can create your Pavilion account to claim your business's profile. Then you'll want to give us your sales contact information to make sure leads that are coming from Pavilion, public agencies that want to get in touch, are going to the right people on your end. You can edit your business information and add additional cooperative contracts if we don't already have them. And finally, you can use Pavilion to share your contracts with entities. So each supplier on Pavilion has a page with all of their contracts listed that we've already obtained. So you can go ahead and share that link with your sales team's email signature or other collateral. Put it up on the tabletops at those events just to make sure that public entity customers can find your contracts all in one place. And if you want to win more business, you can get a paid account with us as well. So this is what we call a pro supplier account. And we see that pro suppliers typically get 2 to 3 times more views and higher conversion to purchases through their cooperative contracts. So our team really works with you to get more information about your business, products, services, and your contracts to optimize your pages. And this allows you to do a few things. First, you show up more consistently as the top result for relevant searches because we have more information that's confirmed about your business, so we can deliver a better experience to public entity buyers. Then you also get to show agencies key information that demonstrates that you can meet their needs and that you know your customer, as Renee mentioned. So, for example, you can provide more information about your products and services, or you can show public entities that you've worked with in the past, especially if they're similar to the one that's searching. And then finally, we have conversations. We're all humans. Folks approach us and ask, "Hey, who have you seen in the space, or who do you know?" So our team is also able to recommend suppliers that we've seen be successful and be helpful to public entity buyers on the platform too. So, FSG and Ecolab are both pro suppliers that we've been working with. So I wanted to turn it over to the two of them to share a bit more about their experiences. So Bernie, asking you to kick it off here, just curious, what was appealing about becoming a pro supplier with Pavilion, and what's been FSG's experience working with Pavilion and the value you're seeing so far?
The opportunity to open up to new customers, obviously, who we may not be touching, who are looking for us, that making the connection, your term matchmaking, is a good one. We've had, so far we're earlier in the game, and we've had some good results for the dollars that we've invested. You mentioned some, where we opened up into markets. We've had some substantial quotes that are, nearing $1 million worth of quotes that look like they're very likely to close and would provide us with a 7 times return on our investment of the cost of participating. So we found that it's a great way to find people, like you say, that have buying intent. We can go out there and we can market and we can sell and create awareness, but trying to find that person when the intent is there, this is a great way to connect a lot of dots.
Awesome. And I do want to call out it. FSD, we're really excited and pleased, has made the decision to make repeat purchases of our pro supplier packages. So, it sounds like having that ROI, that signal around ROI, has been part of that. But can you just share a little bit more about why you've decided to continue?
Sure. Well, we've done digital marketing for a long time, right? And when we compared just our regular digital spend, using Google and search engine advertising and connecting it, the quality of the leads and the level of intent was just very high with this. This is very focused in, as I mentioned, a very good return, right, on what we've been able to get. And at first, you guys make it easy, and you said let's try out a bucket of it. Let's see what the response would be, and it proves itself out as it goes through. So it's been good for us.
Yeah, Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, we're hungry. We know it's kind of new, really on both sides. Or it's like, wait, on the public sector side, it's like, wait, it's free? How does this work? And there's oftentimes some skepticism. And then on the supplier side as well, takes a little bit of education too. So thanks for joining us on the journey, and pleased that we're able to continue working together. For Heather, you decided to increase your pavilion investment after an initial proof of concept as well. So curious to hear from the Ecolab perspective, what drove that decision, and what's the experience been like so far, and what kind of value are you seeing?
Sure. So experience has been great so far. We've talked a lot about, I've talked a lot about limited resources. We're a small team. We can't be everywhere at once. Pavilions helped us create awareness and better conversations to help sell new and existing customers. It helps us educate customers we may not reach around purchasing from us beyond the typical RFP process. Pavilions helped us identify existing customers where we're selling them something under a different process, but they want to expand what they're purchasing. So that they've helped us identify those customers and helped us, help close that business by positioning the contract. So we're able to make the sale. What we really like is the check-in calls with Pavilion. It makes it easy for us to identify what's working, what's not working. You guys are great about staying on top of where are we in the process. So it's just kind of an extra push along. But all in all, I think that we feel like this tool makes us faster, makes us get to the close quicker. So just been a real positive experience so far.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, I know we're heading into the close. We're over time. So as we wrap up, I think just 3 things that I want to make sure everyone takes away from our session today. First, public entities are increasingly turning to cooperative procurement. And that's not just the core procurement team, but increasingly also end users, the folks in the departments that are also aware of cooperative procurement as a vehicle and have a preference to use it as a purchasing pathway. Second, please make sure you're promoting your awarded contracts. Don't let them gather dust. You put in the work to get on those contracts, and you can use them to generate pipeline. And Pavilion can help here, and you can get started for free. And as you've heard, we're eager to make sure that we're providing a great experience, both on the public sector side and as well as clear ROI for suppliers that are really invested in continuing to grow and serve public entities across the country. So thank you all today for joining us. Again, we will share a recap of the conversation and recording, and my contact information is here. I know there were a couple of questions that we didn't get a chance to get to, particularly around regulatory issues as well. So happy to continue the conversation there too. Thank you all so much for the time today, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thank you very much for putting this together, and thank you very much to the panel for sharing your knowledge in this.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Have a great one. Thanks all.
Bye.
See ya.